Hey everyone, welcome back to Gen X Marks the Spot. So sorry I disappeared during the holidays. I was taking a much needed break and I really appreciate it. But I am back now with live streams and videos, and I wanted to start the year off with a fun one. Going over my list. Now this is purely subjective. My list of the top 10 underrated movies that you may or may not have heard of, and if you haven't or have not seen them, please go see these immediately. You will not be disappointed. Now, underrated can mean a lot of things. It can mean just something that everyone knows about but no one really cares about, or it could mean a variety of things, such as how I composed this list. Number one is, of course, a movie that practically no one has ever heard of and no one cares about. Number two, a movie that at the time of its release had a whole lot of fanfare, maybe even won an award or two, but has since faded into a void that no one knows about, no one cares about, no one is resurrecting it from. And number three, it is a movie that is popular within a niche of movie or a style of movie, maybe even has a cult following among fans of that niche of movie. But as far as mainstream audiences, no one really knows or cares. So that was my criteria. Some of these you may have heard of it. Some of these you may have heard of. Some of them I guarantee you have not. And like I said, this is my list. Feel free to create your own list. List your top 10 most underrated movies in the description of in the discussion area below. Would love to chat with you about it. I love movies of all kinds. And with that being said, let's dive in. Oh, and there's a couple of things you will learn from me about me from this list. I remember a lot of movies from my childhood. The 80s and 90s and the late 70s were very, very important to me. I'm a huge Sally Field fan, and I'm uniquely Gen X. That is many of the things you will learn from me when you see my list. So let's talk about number 10. Number 10 is 1974's Black Christmas. This is the original slasher film directed by Bob Clark, a slasher Christmas story that centers on sorority girls who are stalked and killed by a crazed killer known only as Billy, who lives and stalks within the walls and attic and basement of their sorority house. They get killed in a unique amount of ways with a whole lot of variation and a whole lot of skill, all done with practical effects. And it is a bona fide must for anybody that is a slasher fan or anybody that just wants to see a horror film that has more scares than gore. This does have a fair amount, but for the most part, this movie is uniquely scary with a whole lot of tension, and it is a must for anybody that likes the horror or thriller genre. It stars Olivia Hussey, Margot Kidder, John Saxon, and a host of relative unknowns from the time. You cannot deny its mark on the modern horror genre, and I highly, highly recommend it. This is one of those that has a cult following among slasher fans, but if you are not a huge fan of that genre like me, you may or may not know or care about this film, so I highly, highly recommend you seeing it.
Sit on Daddy's lap.
Well, it's my turn. You always sit on
Don't
Daddy's
fight
lap.
over me, girls.
Number 9, 1991's Not Without My Daughter. Starring the awesome Sally Field and Alfred Molina, it tells the real-life story of Betty and 𝗲𝗏 Mahmoudi as they attempt to escape from the clutches of her cruel and savage husband in Iran just after the fall of the Shah. This movie, though very popular when it was released, received a whole lot of backlash from Iranian and just standard Islamic groups that lambasted it for its xenophobia, quote unquote. But the deal is this is based on a real story. Both Betty and 𝗙𝗂𝗫 have come out with books, as well as Moody, the father depicted in it, and we see that a lot of what happened in this, portrayed in this movie, actually happened. It is a warning to any non-Muslim woman that would wed a Muslim man and then go to his home country, and the huge lack of rights that women have and children have in such countries. It is a warning that cannot be denied, especially with recent developments here in the United States and in the UK with a clash of cultures. Some cultures do not mix. We have to remember that. And this movie is a golden example of that. It has since fallen into obscurity, but if you have not seen it, I highly recommend checking it out or reading either Betty or 𝗙𝗪 Mahmoudi's books describing their ordeal. Basically, it follows Betty Mahmoudi as she attempts to flee Iran with her daughter. She has to do it under cover of night in very dangerous ways, crossing the desert between Iran and Turkey. It is definitely a situation you do not want to find yourself in. Definitely check it out. Not without my daughter.
Like a fairy princess, Mama.
Oh, yes, you do. You look just like a fairy princess.
An average family.
You look great.
Thank you.
A special day.
Number 8, 1996's Eye for an Eye. This is again another Sally Field thriller, also starring Kiefer Sutherland in one of his most diabolical roles, and Ed Harris, as well as a host of other great character actors. Basically, you have a mother who sees the murderer of her oldest daughter walk free after the brutal assault and murder of that teenage daughter, and she decides to seek justice on her own. It is what happens when a woman is pushed to the brink, when there is no justice, and she has to seek out justice for herself, or a man. This could very easily be a male character doing this. This is a great thriller, an awesome crime drama that will keep you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. It was lambasted by critics due to its violence, but if you can sit through that, I do recommend you checking this movie out. It is a treat for the eyes and the sensibilities. I do not recommend taking the law into your own hands, but again, with current events, I think this is a movie worth checking out.
Hey, I got a question I want to ask you all. How many people came here to change the world?
They came to Columbus University to get an education.
Number 7, 1995's Higher Learning, directed by John Singleton. This is a great movie that kind of sets 1990s United States into the cultural setting of a fictional Columbus University. All of the main struggles that we see today about removing statues of Columbus, moving statues in American history, the real history of America, all of that is portrayed here in the less violent times of the 1990s. It stars a whole plethora of actors from Omar Epps, Christy Swanson, Michael Rappaport, Ice Cube. A lot of actors that have since come out as both liberal and conservative make up the host of this movie. It is well written, well acted, and comes at it from one of the most neutral standpoints that I've ever seen a higher tone movie come at. This basically takes the typical hood movie and white struggle movie that you would see in the 80s and 90s and merges them together. And it is a conflict of culture, a conflict of beliefs, but it does show what I consider, even though there's some tragedy in it, it does show, in my opinion, what could be a hopeful ending. And so it's what we all hope for. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend John Singleton's Higher Learning.
Most of my players are farm boys, or they're from the inner cities. Football is their deliverance.
Number 6, 1993's The Program. This is a sports drama starring the great late James Caan, Halle Berry, Omar Epps, Craig Schaefer, Christy Swanson, and Joey Lauren Adams. It tells the story of a Division 1A college football team from the fictional Eastern State University, how they are essentially used as money makers. It threads the line between should we pay college athletes versus not. All of the antics they get up to. In fact, it was highly, highly chastised and even had a infamous scene removed after it was released because people were afraid people would try to imitate it. If you really want a behind the curtain look at collegiate athletes, particularly a Division I football, this is a must, and it's a very enjoyable movie.
Gonna be a rough trip. Are you big and bad enough to handle it?
Number 5, Day of the Animals. You may also know this one as Something Is Out There. It's a 1977 eco-horror film starring Leslie Nielsen. It is the story of what happens when the ozone layer, in fact, does deplete. If you're a Gen Xer like me, or perhaps an older millennial, even a younger baby boomer, you remember all the awful things we were told about the ozone layer depleting. Well, this movie took it and showed us what would happen if we ever did that and the animals decided to get revenge. It follows a group of hikers in the Northern California mountains as they are used as fodder for animals that have essentially developed a psychosis because of the fading ozone layer and the entry of high UV rays into the atmosphere. It uses practical effects, a slew of trained animals, and some good, cheesy 1970s acting makes this an exciting movie for anyone. I highly recommend it, and Leslie Nielsen fights a grizzly bear in this, and it's worth it just for that reason, so check it out.
Norma Rae has been working since she was 16.
Number 4, Norma Rae from 1979. Now, I know what you're saying. Sally Field won an Academy Award for Norma Rae, Tracy. I know she did. But this is one of those movies that has since fallen into obscurity. And in fact, I was wanting to watch it the other day, and I could not find it on streaming to save my life, and I had to break out my OVHS tape to be able to watch it. That's how obscure this movie has become. It's a travesty that this film is not available for streaming anywhere. I don't understand that. It's a great movie. It stars Sally Field, Pat Hingle, Beau Bridges, Ron Liebman in the real-life story of a woman by the name of Norma Rae who fought to bring a union into a North Carolina textile mill when a union was actually needed. This goes way beyond the politics of a union, the unions that you see today, where they are still existent in a lot of industries as only money suckage. This actually comes from a time when they were needed. And it is a brave, wonderful, realistic look at the lives of textile mill workers in the South. And this has some homegrown attachment for me because this was actually filmed in my home state of Alabama in 𝗂𝗏𝗪𝗏 near Auburn. So this is a great movie. It's a classic. You should check it out.
Aurora and Don Bluth Productions present a classic adventure in motion picture entertainment.
Number 3, 1982's animated classic, The Secret of NIMH. It got a lot of play when it first came out, but has since fallen into obscurity as so much more animation has come on scene. It's basically the story of a mouse named Mrs. Brisby who is trying to move her cinder block house before the farmer overlays the ground for planting. She basically is sent to a friend of her late husband's and encounters a colony of super intelligent rats that have been made super intelligent due to medical and other testing done on them by humans, and it shows the adventures they have in trying to move her house. Even though it sounds a little cheesy, it is a wonderful movie, and I highly recommend you checking it out for some classic 1980s underrated animation.
Here, OG, let me give you a hand with that.
Thanks, Billy D. I have to introduce today's ABC Weekend Special.
What am I?
It's the exciting conclusion of Cougar, based on the book An American Ghost by Chester Aaron.
Number 2 barely qualifies as a movie in a lot of people's eyes, but it is, for me, one of the things I remember so vividly from my childhood. During the early 80s, from the late 1970s to the mid 1980s, ABC had, in addition to their after-school specials, they had the ABC Weekend Special, which aired basically after cartoons on Saturdays. And they consisted of either one-shot 30-minute episodes of either animation or real-life action, or they had movies made for children that were split into 3 parts. And one of the ones I remember so vividly is from season 7. It is a 3-part mini movie. It's about an hour and 15 minutes long if you play all the episodes together without commercials, called Cougar. It's basically the story of a brother and sister in the late 1800s that are trapped on a flooded out island in a raging river somewhere in the American West wilderness, and they are set upon by some dastardly criminals, and they also have a wild cougar trapped on the island with them that eventually becomes an ally and protector to the children. It is real life. The cougar trained in it is well trained. It's entertaining. I highly recommend, if you can find it, to check out Cougar from ABC Weekend Special.
It's Christmas Eve 1950, and I'm still only 11 years old. I swear it takes forever to become a teenager. Of course, if you live in a dinky coal mining town in Caulfield County, it takes forever to get anywhere.
Number 1 actually has 2 names. Today it is known as The Christmas Miracle in Caulfield, USA, but when I watched it in the early 80s, the 1977 film was known as The Christmas Coal Mine Miracle, starring Laura Ingalls herself, Melissa Gilbert. It is the real-life story of a Kentucky coal mining accident that takes place in the 1950s on Christmas, and a town that sees most of the men trapped underground with no hope of survival. Truly, it is a miracle the way they are rescued, and it gives a realistic slice of what life was like for the early people in Appalachia. I can really roll with this movie, not only because it has Laura Ingalls, and I'm a huge Little House on the Prairie fan, and I'm a huge fan of the books as well in it, but also it has a very early appearance by Kurt Russell, as well as some other great actors and actresses, but also because both of my grandfathers were coal miners, I truly, truly can relate to this movie, and I highly, highly recommend it. And there you have it, my top 10 list of some of my favorite obscure and underrated movies that I've seen in my life. I could go on forever. I could probably list 30 of these, but I wanted to bring what I think is the best of the best to you, and hopefully give you something to watch, especially if you're like me and in in the way of the winter storm that's coming through. It might give you something to watch. And I hope you've enjoyed this. I'll be back really, really soon with another movie review or another video. And until next time, Gen X out.